any software process is an interleaved sequence of various activities. These activities could be technical, managerial, documentational, and so on. Their overall goal would be specifying requirements, designing the system, implementing the system, and testing the software as a system. Software developers use a variety of different software tools in their work. Tools are particularly useful for supporting the editing of different types of documents, for managing immense volume of detailed information that is usually generated by a large software product. As we have already seen, the four basic software process activities that apply to many of software development is specification of the software, software development, software validation, software evolution. In the waterfall model, for example, these four activities are organized in sequence. If we consider the incremental model that we have just seen, they are interleaved. That is, there is appropriate feedback going back to previous stages, coming to the next stage, and so on. Such kind of interleaving facility is available in the incremental model. Now, how these activities are carried out totally depends on the type of software system, the organization structures, and other factors that help in developing such a software system. So in this lecture video and in the ones to follow, we are going to take a look at all these software process activities in detail. In this video, we will talk about the first software process activity, that is software specification. Software specification, or requirements engineering as it is called, is the process of understanding and defining what services are required from the system. It is about also identifying the constraints of the system's operation and development. The requirements engineering is very crucial in software process developments, as software errors which come out earlier at this stage can, you can avoid them turning into major blunders which cannot be changed, or change could be costly during the later stage of development once the system is almost out. The requirements engineering process is highlighted or depicted on this slide as a diagram on the left side. So the entire process aims to produce an agreed requirement document that specifies a system, which satisfies the stakeholders' requirements. A stakeholder is an entity who is connected with the software. It could be a customer, it could be an end user, it could be a developer, it could be a tester. Anyone who's directly involved with the development, implementation, testing, using, specifying requirements for the software becomes the system stakeholder. So requirements are usually presented at two levels of detail. First one is for the end users and customers who need a high-level statement of requirement or an overview of the requirement, because a customer or an end user may not be a technical person who will understand detailed technical specifications. On the other hand, a system developer would need a more detailed system requirement specification. So understand that in the software specification process activity phase, we are going to sit with the customers or the end users, take their requirements, analyze these requirements, convert them into a specification at two levels of detail. One, a higher level superficial overview for the customer, and two, a detailed view for the system developer. Now let's look at the diagram depicted on the slide. Here, the entire requirements engineering process, or the software specification process, involves 1, 2, 3, and 4 stages, or 4 main activities. Whatever you can see in these oval-shaped boxes are the activities. The arrows indicate passing data, information, and control between activities. Whatever you can see in these rectangles are the outcomes of the activities. Okay, so let's start with the first activity, that is feasibility study. Feasibility study is this. An estimate is made of whether the identified user needs may be satisfied using current software and hardware technologies. The study will consider whether the proposed system will be cost effective from a business point of view and if it can be developed within existing budgetary constraints. A feasibility study will definitely will reveal whether you should proceed with the rest of the development. And on the advantages, it is really cheap and quick. And the result of this feasibility study is what is pointing downwards in the rectangular box, and that is the feasibility report. So this feasibility report, which is the outcome of the feasibility study, will inform whether or not you have to go ahead with a more detailed analysis or you have arrived at the decision that the system to be designed is feasible. So that is the first step in software specification. From this, you can see there is an outcome here, and that is the end point. From this, once you're satisfied with this, you go to the next activity, which is called as the requirements elicitation and analysis. This is the process of deriving the system's requirements through observation of existing systems, discussions with potential users, and who are going to procure the system, the task analysis, and so on. So this may also involve the development of one or more system models or prototypes. These help you understand the system that needs to be specified. So once your feasibility study is done, based on this, you're going to make a small model or prototype of the system and you're going to deploy it just so that you can elicit more detailed, more technical, more understandable and reasonable requirements which you would have missed in the feasibility study. So this outcome of this could be prototypes or system models that could be used by the user or the procurer of your system to give you more information. You could simply observe how people use the system, what is their response, how the system responds, and so on. You can see we go on to the next phase now, that is the the requirement specification. The requirement specification is the activity of translating the information gathered during the analysis activity, that is the previous activity, into a document that defines a set of requirements. So after getting in touch with the consumer, the end user, the customer, you have made a feasibility report, you have made a system model or a prototype, and now you're going to convert these requirements into a more formal documentation called as the requirement specification documentation. And the outcome of this activity is a document called as the users and system requirements. The two types of requirements may be included in this document, where the user requirement is an abstract statement of the system requirement for the customer or the end user, how the end user or the customer should use the system. The system requirements, on the other hand, is a more detailed description of the functionality that the system is going to provide to the customer. All right. So from the specification phase, you can see there is a feedback. If you're not happy with this needs refinement, you can always go back to requirements elicitation and analysis phase. Once this phase is complete, we go to the next phase, that is the requirements validation. Now this is the checking phase. So the validation is an activity that checks the requirements for being realistic, for consistency, for completeness. You're going to understand if the requirements are realistic in terms of cost, in terms of time, in terms of implementation complexity, and so on. You're going to see if the requirements are consistent. That is, the customer is saying exactly what he wants and he does not mean something else. You're going to test this requirements for completeness. What if the customer has omitted some features and has expected you to assume and add them into the design and implementation? So all this kind of validation or testing of the requirements will be done in this phase. During this process, errors in the requirements documents will be discovered, and it is then modified in order to correct and incorporate the changes suggested. So at the end of the activity, the outcome of the requirements engineering process is a complete, consistent, reliable requirements document. Because there can be errors and omissions even in the last phase, you can see there is constant feedback right from the elicitation phase to the specification phase and the validation phase. That is, even if you reach the validation phase, you can still go back to the specification and still go back further to the requirements elicitation and analysis phase. Both the system models and the systems as well as the user requirements document are going to build up or help in building the final requirements documents. Of course, the activities in the requirements process are not simply carried out in a sequential fashion as we had seen in a waterfall model. Requirement analysis continues even when you define and specify, and new requirements come to light throughout the process. Therefore, the activities of analysis, definition, and specification are interleaved as you can see in this diagram. Thank you.